action. Hello, EDUC 112 Nation. It's Professor Taylor, and I'm so excited to have a great leader in the area of finance, legislation, and really government advocacy, Sara Bachez. Sorry, Sara. Thanks for being here this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, you have had an interesting career to get in the chair you're in now, and I've always touched by hearing your story. So why don't you tell the class a little bit about how you got to this point in your life and where you grew up and all that good stuff.
Perfect. Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I hope that this is a meaningful session and that everyone knows that at the end of this, everyone's welcome to reach out to me. And that's something that I truly believe is in mentorship. Had it not been for mentorship, I would not be where I am today. Every step I have taken has been because someone believed in me. And I was very fortunate that early on in high school, I was told to apply to this UCLA business program called the UCLA Reardon Scholars Program. And because of that exposure and opportunity, I got to meet a lot of college recruiters and college folks. So that was interesting to then figure out which college to pick. And I then went from South Central LA, Crenshaw High School, to Cal, to UC Berkeley, where I majored in mass communications. I thought I wanted to be a reporter. And because of that experience with the UCLA Reader Scholars, I was able to attain 2 internships where I interned for LA Times and La Opinión. And that's when I realized I didn't really necessarily want to do journalism, but I was very intrigued in the writing and communication side of things. It wasn't until my last year of college that a professor told me about the Capital Fellowship Program. And that's how I became a Capital intern, a Capital Fellow. Once I graduated from college, I worked for a lobbying firm during the summer to get more experience, learn the lingo, learn the flow of things. And then I was fortunate enough to work for Senator Kuehl, who's the chair of the Senate Education Committee. And after that experience, it was the beginning of the Great Recession. It took me about 5 months to land my first then real job after a fellowship. And that's where the anxiety hit really high of my value and my worth it. Why can't I get an interview? Why can't I get a job offer? I applied to 25 jobs. I did 23 interviews and I got 2 offers on the same day. But Assembly Budget Committee called me first to offer me the budget consultant position on higher education issues. And so for 5 years, I worked on the fiscal side for the Assembly Budget Committee. And that's how I really took off in this public policy space. And after dealing with the Great Recession, the major reductions we did to early education, childcare, and workforce development issues, I realized I needed to find myself again and figure out what is my motive or what's my purpose, because making recommendations to continue reducing programs didn't feel real, didn't feel authentic to me. And that's when I heard about Jeff Baca and this organization called CASBO, the California Association of School Business Officials. And they were hiring for their second legislative advocate. And that's how I came to CASBO.
I really think
you muted yourself again.
Did it twice. Bad host. Sara, what really intrigues me about you, though, is that you come from a very diverse background. If someone sees you right now, oh, come on, she's a UCLA kid, she's got a great job, she's working the hallways. But that's not true. I think that's one thing we know. And our students here in this class come from extremely diverse and challenging backgrounds and great backgrounds, but it wasn't easy, right? You didn't grow up with a spoon-fed world, right?
No, I'm very fortunate to know my history, that my parents migrated here from El Salvador due to a civil war that took place in the late 70s. They were young, they were in high school, and they met in Los Angeles, fell in love, and started a family, and had to work really difficult 2 to 3 jobs. And so watching them try to figure out this world, not understanding the language, not understanding the culture, being the first daughter of 5, where you straddle 2 worlds, you straddle your home country and your your heritage, but then you go out into this other world that tells you you are other, that you are not from here, but you're not from there because your accent isn't as strong in Spanish, but it's too strong in English. It was very challenging. And then, yeah, I have a unique last name. It's not very common, which I'm very proud of. It's a very proud last name. And I'm very honored because my parents really taught me about strong work ethic, always being honest and true to your word, that no matter what, all we could take in this life is that integrity and our reputation. Everything else can disappear. But what you have, just like this degree that everyone's pursuing and in their education they're getting, no one could take that piece of paper away from you. And so with that direction that my parents gave me, I really went gung-ho on why education matters. And that's why I've made it my life purpose to make sure more people have access to public education.
Yeah, and it's like, there's not really then work, right? It's really more of a higher calling, almost at a godly level. So, hey, I went to the best El Salvador restaurant in Glendale. I went to a conference there. First of all, the waiter he was just a gorgeous El Salvadoran guy, and all the people I were with were falling in love. But the food was off the chart, off the chart. You owe me a great dinner somewhere.
Okay.
Listen, CASBO has been around for a while. Can you tell us what the acronym means and kind of just quickly what it does?
Yeah, so the California Association of School Business Officials, the wonderful thing about education is we're known for our acronyms. So CASBO has been around since 1928. It's a member-driven organization. It was created by administrators who administer the school resources, provide technology, HR, payroll, as well as child nutrition services. So it's really everyone who's making sure that the wheels are turning inside of those schools. They're the folks that are behind the scenes, just making sure the lights are on and that your teachers have every resources that they need, as well as the students have the accommodations necessary to be educated in the school side. So the exciting part is everything we do is from that lens of how do we support and improve the educational services that we provide to students? How do we make the work environment better for our staff, and how do we provide professional development so that folks can excel to the next level? Just like your students are here getting their education for that next level, or my organization provides professional development, because learning is an ever constant thing. You don't stop learning. If you want to continue to progress in whatever matter, be it personal or professional, professional development is key to that.
Yeah, I did something interesting in my career. I piloted an evaluation of all the classified staff, including school business officials and Elk Grove. And I had them take the teaching standards, but that's how we evaluate teachers, and say, okay, pick one and tell me how you're helping that teacher with those standards. And people freaked out at first, especially the finance people. Once they caught on that there is no good classroom management without a great school business official, there is no student achievement without a great person who gets the funding and resources to them and figures ways to do that. It's super imperative. Well, this class is really an exciting class. I love the fact that it's right in it's right in the moment of what's going on nationally. So the students, our final project is to do what you do so well, and everyone loves to do, but it's nerve-wracking, where you get 2 to 3 minutes to talk about a bill, a policy. Sara, you have to do that, and you have to drop the mic. You got to show your passion like you do. It's not about the actual bill. It's about you convincing people this is your thing. Any tips for our people? Because I know that moment you're waiting in line, and all of a sudden you're at the microphone and your heart beats, and you can make it or break it, right? You really can.
Correct. And I think what I have to remind myself is this matters. Be it taking a position in support of an issue or opposing an issue. And what I enjoy about what I get to do when I lobby or when I advocate and testify is that is this policy intended to improve the lives and services for students? Yes or no? Mm-hmm. And I have to put in my Sasha Fierce persona and tell myself that those nerves need to hold on for a second, because I still get nervous. My hands still sweat. So for folks that may see me or watch any of our webinars and go, wow, you never look nervous. Oh, it's because I put nervous aside and I tell her to take a second, I do acknowledge that I still get nervous, but I'm doing this because it matters. And so when I try to go up and testify, my goal is to make sure that, one, I understand the facts and policy behind the rationale for my speech. Two, that I have it written down. I'm still one of those people who writes, like hand writes, not types and not reads on a phone. I think that looks disrespectful. So just FYI for folks practicing, really practicing your writing, the more you write it, the more your brain processes that information. So I do a lot of practicing beforehand, but I also go back to what is the intended purpose? Why am I here for? And to convince someone, I have to be convinced myself, right? If I'm
Right.
trying to let you know this matters, then I need to also understand why it matters. And that's why we do our grant work in making sure we understand these policies and the real life implications.
Good stuff. And I think, I find it really interesting. Here's a person who works with the school business officials. And one of your big passions, and I see the look in your eye when you start talking about it, you're driven and all that stuff, is the digital divide, the lack of internet connectivity for families and children throughout the state. And I'm going, why does she care? She's like supposed to be into money type stuff. So why is that so important to you as a CASBO leader, when most people say, oh, that's a techie thing, but why do you think that's so important? Why are you so driven by it?
Because we go back to, are we really setting up our public education system to be prepared for the 21st century? And that's part of our platform, that we are here to ensure that in order to have a thriving economy, our public education system has to be in the 21st century. And this pandemic revealed that that is not true, that 1 million students did not have access to connectivity and devices, and that what we lack is access, affordability, and reliability.
Yeah.
And so again, with anything that we do, is it equitable? Is it accessible? Is it real? And is it attainable? And the answer was no. And so the good thing about taking this on and trying to be a coalition leader and bringing people together is that if we are to say that we are student focused and that we really care about students succeeding, this example of how many people don't have access to digital systems and technology really does undermine then our ability to say we're going to set up a thriving economy once we recover out of this pandemic.
Good stuff. Now, listen, you are fearless and driven. I mean, anyone who's been turned down 25 times for a job and kept going is somebody who's really got grit. And where do you get that focus and competitive nature? And why do you think it's so important when you're trying to pass or get through your policy or your grant or your ledge bill? Why is that so important, you think?
I think it matters to be persistent because change is not easy and change does not happen overnight. So I think for those who are in your classroom aspiring to become politicians or policymakers or begin a journey in this political world, the reality is that change takes time. And so knowing that, what I've come back to realize is that doesn't mean that I can't persist and build momentum. And how you build momentum is taking those baby steps by educating folks, by bringing partners along, and by all coming together and sounding the same message. But that took time to build. And so I think as the oldest sister, as the oldest daughter, that comes with a lot of responsibility of I had to pave a path. So I think from an early age, I learned that I couldn't give up publicly. I couldn't give up and just quit because I had a lot of little ones watching and looking. And so that has been my motivation. And I get a lot of no's in this industry. Education is woefully underfunded until this moment that we're living in. We would not have faced all of these issues had we not had 40 years of underfunding education, right? We wouldn't be in these woes of our facilities being so dilapidated, having all of these old technology systems that weren't able to quickly turned and pivoted to distance learning. All of that was 40 years in the making. And so if we don't start today in educating folks, if we don't take today as that day of reckoning that we're gonna build a movement and say that it's time for change, positive change, so that more people have access to high quality education, then it's gonna take that much longer to make. So when we step back and realize change does take time, but if we start incrementally by building and creating little building blocks, that's how you lead forward.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? It does take time, but what's frustrating, and this is why you're the new generation, education's great at doing 7-year plans to roll out curriculum. Well, that's a kid's whole middle and high school experience. So I don't like the fact that we keep saying it takes time to change the digital divide. And that's why I see you storming into meetings and creating coalitions that rub against people. But you're right, a year in a kid's life is like a dog's life, right? It's a big time. And we keep saying, oh, the adults need 5 years to do this. I'm like, that's a kid's whole high school experience, and shame on us. So that's what I love about you. Hey, listen, you can't win all the time, right? I remember one time, Dave Gordon, my superintendent, sent me into a meeting, a hearing. And this was back when the recession was real bad, Sarah, and they were removing sodas from campuses, right? So the entire place was filled with nutritionists, health people, and I testified that you're giving this a 2-month turnaround to get rid of soda machines. That's taking income away from our schools. We need more time. Well, I turn around, there's 200 people staring at me like, and my neighbor was there, and I thought she was going to egg my house. And I said, we're not against the bill, we're against the timing, right? I know you've gone in and not won. You don't win everything, right? We didn't win everything in the AB 86. We won a lot. How do you feel about that? Because it's hard being in a job where you're not going to win, but you're going to make a statement. Well, what do you think about that? It's not a slam dunk all the time, even if it's the greatest idea in the world. I'm sure you've had a great idea and you're like, I can't believe I didn't win that one. So what's advice? Because some of our people are going to do a testimony, and I'm trying to tell them, push the envelope. You may not get it, but it sets a tone. So what about you? What do you think? That's a tough one. Because
It is a tough one.
You hate to lose.
I hate to lose. I am terrible at losing. I love chess. I think my recommendation for folks is start practicing chess, because this industry is about multi-level strategies. You have to think ahead. You cannot just rest on your laurels and wait.
Did you say chess with the rook and the king?
Yes.
Oh, I'll kill you.
Well play. But that's how I see.
I won't kill you. I'll just pretend I can. I'll let you win.
The good thing is I'm really good at moving all my pawns and making sure that I spread them out. And that's my strategy, is how do we build coalitions? Because I cannot be the only messenger. If it's such a great idea, you need an army behind you. You need to make sure that you have partners who are willing to take on that fight. And so I'll give your folks an example of a fight that we have yet to make huge progress: special education. What more worthy cause can we be talking about today than the needs of our most disadvantaged students who have special needs? And yet, for 40 years, we haven't made change with IDEA. Right. We were promised 40%.
IDEA, you got to tell them IDEA is a special ed law. So yeah, we have our acronyms. Yeah.
Yes, we have our acronyms.
No change in 40 years.
No change in 40 years. The federal government promised us 40% of funding for every student that has a special need. California is receiving 9%, not 40,
that's
9. Okay, so for the last 8 years, as I've been working for CASBO, we have made that one of our platforms to equalize and to generate additional resources to grow the pot so that more funding is allocated for our special education children. When we were facing the local control funding formula in 2012 and 13 under Governor Brown, special education was kept outside. We can't talk about it. We can't deal with it. Okay, well, now in 2021, so Governor Newsom is the first governor to actually start putting incremental funding towards it without changing the formula. And so again, what we're saying is we need to equalize resources so that every child has access to the same amount of resources to be served. But then we also have to realize that our special education students have different needs depending on their specifications, whatever their plans say. And so are we then funding for success, or are we just being mediocre at it? So that's an issue that for 40 years, we haven't made much change at the federal level. We're more optimistic now. Finally, in the last 2 years, we have made incremental change where we have a governor who has put funding, not a lot of funding, but some funding, right? So something. That means we have to now keep pushing and drumming the beat that these students matter. And so for me, it's one of those issue areas that I will not give up. We will not relent. We will continue in every opportunity, in every setting we get, to make sure that those students are recognized. So just like CTE has been underfunded and then ignored and then reshuffled somewhere else, so have these students. And unfortunately, no one has taken that on because it's tough, it's hard. But that's where it's our responsibility when we represent schools to make sure, are we advocating for those who need the most?
Yeah, and you lose 40 years in a row, right? But you keep going, right? That is brave leadership. To me, that is true leadership. Dr. Margaret Fortune is a dear friend of mine, and she fights for African American students, and it's pathetic how some of these districts, their graduation rates are so low. And she walks into a room and she's going to bring it, and she makes you. She came to our small school district association and spoke for about 15 minutes, and said, "We're together. Rural kids, African American kids, no one cares about them." And then she really brought her issue in, left the room, and got a standing O. She's an amazing person. And I think you with the digital divide, same thing. I've been hearing this since I was a teacher in 1986, that we need to have equitable, support for computer education and school and IT and all that. And good for you to take on something that you're probably not going to win every year, but good luck when you keep walking into their office and dropping your South Central self. Hey, listen, last question, and this is important. We have a lot of students that are female, and it is to me, it's still a very dominated male field in the area of government relations, lobbying. In fact, I don't think there's a lobbying firm. Sandra Morales is a good friend of mine, and I'm like, where is a woman-led of color association like Capital Advisors, like Peter Birdsall's group? Where are you guys at, and why does it take so long? What's going on? And this is not just I think there's women still now in the hallways, but where are they at the leadership level beyond associations? Where's the private firms? What do you think about that? And how can you encourage all of our students, but especially the women, to stop, close that divide, I guess you can say?
And I'm hopeful that I'm part of bringing other younger women of color along. That's been part of my goal when we've created internship opportunities, when we've placed and recommend people, that as a sponsor, I now can support other people like I've been supported. You are absolutely correct. It is difficult. It is a male-driven industry. Most of the executives in all of these firms it's predominantly male-led, and there is a different voice when a woman is in the room. And then as a woman of color, I definitely can tell the difference that we bring when I am in the room, the different reactions that we get, and the opportunities when I do speak and when I choose not to speak. We have to be strategic. There are going to be times where we will be reprimanded. And I'll be honest, this industry is ruthless. I had to file a claim against a senator a year ago on February 19th of 2020 because he was racist towards 3 women of color. And they allowed him to term out, and nothing came of the investigation, but we mounted an investigation. And so I think, again, as a leader, as someone who is in this position, it is my responsibility to speak up, not just for our schools and students, but also for ourselves as advocates in this political environment. It is tough. There are days where I just feel worn down because I'm constantly reminded of you are other. And then I have to remind myself, my parents went through this, they continue to go through this, and I am fortunate because I have my education, that I know I have rights, that I know I could speak up, and I know how to speak up. But it is exhausting. And I think the The difference will be when we get our male counterparts to start supporting us and speaking up with us.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, along those same lines too, especially the digital divide, you're dealing with a very Republican white male-based leadership all out there in our rural communities, and you have to walk into a room, and that's got to feel uncomfortable. How do you set the tone in the room that it's not really about gender, it's really about the issue? But that's tough because I can see their arms folded, or they're not paying attention, or call you honey or something. How do you deal with that? Because that I think is an important message to talk to people about, because they will be presenting to a white male, right? And that's me. And how do you present that? Because you have to try to remove the color barrier and the gender barrier. That's a different ballgame for white males.
Yeah, and the notions of imposter syndrome, when you're constantly reminded your kind isn't here, and you're very passionate, and you're very sassy, and I mean, I get it all, right? And
they pat you on the head. Good
well,
job.
sweetie, right? But what I've learned, and what I tell my mentees and what I tell my colleagues who work with me, is we're all humans at the end of the day. That person you're about to present to, they're a human being. As much as they have a position, a title, when you strip that away and you remind yourself that the person before you is a human being, which you are too, it creates this equalization. And that's what I remind myself when I preside, when I speak before a legislative committee, where I know I'm going to lose because they're going to vote yes, and I wanted to know. I have to remind myself that I'm going in on a cause for an issue, not for myself. I'm here. And so when folks start to, I've had a situation where an assembly member, a Latina, made a push that I didn't care about pregnancy. I didn't care about women's rights and women's maternity leave. I had to remind her that I was not here on behalf of Sara Bachez. I am here on behalf of an association that, although the policy on itself sounds like a good undertaking, the reality, just like your soda machine example, lacks the funding support to make it a reality. If the state, if politicians care about this cause, put the resources behind it and make it a reality, but do not sacrifice the current services we're providing and remove those resources to reallocate them for this purpose, because what you've done is you just stole from students directly. And so going back to, are we here about the kids? Are we here about the issue? And not making it personal. And that's really hard, especially when you're young or you're new or inexperienced. It's so easy to go in with your personal emotions, but I recommend reading the 4 Agreements by Dr. Miguel Reese.
Okay.
And so not to take things personal, but to be honest with your word, to commit to what you're doing. So I read that book once a year to remind myself that even though we're in this cutthroat industry, it's not about me. It's about the schools that I represent. So it takes off that sting that sometimes can be felt when you're nervous, when you're anxious, when you hear a lot of no's, and you continue to then hear no's. It helps in reminding that what is my real purpose and what's the goal here, and that it's not to be better or anything, it's just to try to do what's best.
Yeah, let me push the envelope just one more, because I find this type of conversation really helpful for people. We all have to use like a gift we have to build a relationship. But one thing that I don't fall for is the flirty, flicking the hair type of thing by a woman just because they're maybe attractive or whatever. Everyone knows that's the zone I don't like. As a matter of fact, I go the other way. But in a woman, for a woman though, that's sometimes their comfort zone. When you see that in the hallways of the Capitol, where you got the young kid who's, maybe unbutton the shirt or something, or doing something. What is that? How do you feel about that? What's your recommendation? Because we all need something to kind of make the first entrance, but in the long run, how does that make you feel as a woman and as a leader to watch these women do that type of behavior to get across their message?
And so the good thing about being where I'm now at, where I'm in middle management and I get to, I have enough cachet that I'm recognized, I can go up to interns and I will. If I see a young woman with too short of a skirt, too short of a shirt, or too high of heels, it is what tone and what message are you sending?
Yeah.
Because we're not here to sell ourselves. We're here to sell policy ideas. And so that's the step one, is really recognizing that environment. That is it fun or is it professional? And there's a time for fun and laughter and to be yourself, whatever self you want to be. But in these professional settings, regardless of the changes in fashion, there's still an expectation because it is a culture where the lines are blurred very often. And the unfortunate part is who gets damaged is that one young person, because they have no experience, they don't have cachet, they're not recognized, and they seem malleable, they seem accessible. And so that is really a sensitive topic where if you see me, my clothes is mostly longer or conservative because I know my body type and I recognize that. And I'm, again, being the oldest, my dad was a little stricter with me, right? But I also know that I'm not here for that purpose. I can use that clothes in my personal settings, not in this environment. And this environment is very high schoolish, right? It's very much cliquish. There's different groups. What group do you want to belong to? And if you're okay and you recognize that's the kind of group I want to be in, then be okay with it. And recognize that it comes with an assumption. People make assumptions despite what you think. And so recognizing again is how are we showing up when you present, when you meet with your professor, when you show up to a space. I think sometimes people take themselves too particular or too casual and say, well, right now it's just an office meeting. Right now it's just a teen group meeting. And for me, it's no, this is a purpose. This is a learning environment. This is my work environment. This potentially can lead to networking somewhere else. And I don't want people to have a perception that I am too casual, even when I think that this matters. And so the way we show up does reflect in the intentions that we bring forward. And the unfortunate part is women are looked at differently than men. And then if you tag on, you're a woman of color, you have a distinguishable last name, you have a distinguishable attribute to yourself, be it an accent. The reality is people see first with their eyes.
Good one. Very touching, by the way. And I think that's for both genders, right? When they step up to the mic for those 2 or 3 minutes, if you're not presentable in a professional manner, I don't care what you're saying. I don't care what your mouth says, right? They're watching you walk down those steps to that podium. And if you got a hoodie on or,
your phone.
Yeah, your phone, you're reading your phone. Yeah, I mean, you just got to, you get that moment. So, and it's interesting.
And it goes by so quickly too.
Yeah,
and you're so right. People are going to catch on and be like, was that person reading from an iPad just saying that they need financial aid, but they have the newest, latest iPad and holding a Coach purse?
Yeah.
And we've seen that. I mean, I really had to reprimand a student and be like, no, you can't come up here and say you need more financial aid and you have a Coach purse that's a big one, so clearly it's expensive, and an iPad. The message is skewed because you just said you need additional resources, but that you also don't know how to spend it. And sorry, yes, maybe your mom, your grandma, someone bought you that purse, but the message that you've just conveyed to your audience is you don't know how to use your resources well. Yeah. And here you are asking for additional funding at a time where your persona is showing something else.
It's really interesting. This is a career tech class. And it really, since 1917, there's been some heroic people stepped up, including Carl Perkins and others. But even in my lifetime, tomorrow I'll be attending a meeting with Patrick O'Donnell, wants to put maybe another $500 million into career tech ed. It's because there's a little army of people that have worked for years to save career tech ed and save apprenticeship. And this class used to be a big textbook, like that big, and our students would read it. And I'm like, what am I doing? We're in the Capitol where our students can learn. And just talking to you for 30 or 40 minutes is better than that entire book. I'm telling you, this is how I try to tell students, it's all about relationships, people, tell your story, Why is this person passionate about it? That's how the greatest events have taken place in education and workforce development. And really appreciate your time, Sarah. You're a magical person, and our students learned a lot from you. And I'll be sharing this video to them and others. And thanks so much. I know you're on vacation, and I appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you so much. And please let them know my email address. So for them to know, my personal one is sarabachez@gmail.com. And I'm always available. I truly believe in mentorship. So if anyone's interested in advocacy, education, getting their MBA, because I didn't mention that I have my MBA from Sac State, go Hornets.
Hello.
You don't have to stop learning.
It's interesting. I try to tell the students, it's all about when people give you that offer, take it. And you know how it goes. I've offered my services, and the people that take it, I've helped them guide their career. So to the students, the ball's in your court. Some of you don't need the mentorship, but Sarah will connect you to the right people and do what's right. So Sarah, thanks again. I'll give them your email address. I won't give them your cell phone because I know I text you at random hours of the week. But thanks so much, and enjoy your day. Take care.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.